Trent's in the same state, dude, so it'll be fine.
Productive UTC? No way.
Oh my god, I am so exhausted. I just left work. When I'm podcasting tonight, I'm done.
Yeah, you're just gonna pass out. Well, it's good to have you here, man. I mean, last week I know that you were trying to get home stuck in traffic and all, and it didn't end up even happening because I ended up with internet apocalypse for about 12 hours. That did not come back on, by the way, until 10 a.m. the next day.
Well,
wow.
Good news is I got my certification. They're opening up new research associate positions at the Knight's Cancer Institute. I'm applying for. They're doing research with CRISPR, which I'm trying to get in.
Is this like an internal move, or is this?
Yeah, it's an internal move within OHSU.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's what it sounded like. Okay.
Yeah, so it's all good. It's just these last weeks have been less like study, apply, work. Yeah, just double it. Yeah, working shifts because the lead's gone, and they're looking for a new lab administrator. So yeah, I was like, dude, I can't do the long view for a month. I've got to get my life in order right now.
Oh, no worries, dude. Like I'm still at the getting. Nothing has quite settled down for me. That all of that stuff for me actually is not done until Saturday at the latest. So I've got tomorrow will be full day state tournament tennis, and then tennis is going to be that will be one commitment less, and then we're kind of petering out our school year, which isn't going to end until June 4th, my wife's birthday. For the first time ever, she's going to school on her birthday.
Holy cow! Sorry.
You get saved, dude.
Andy was kind enough to volunteer to be our next guest, and when we fire the long view. So I was like, oh, thank God, there's one less thing I have to worry about. So thank you, Andy.
No problem. I just got to get to at least 2 more games of Masters of Venison. That'll be fine.
Maybe you know more about it than me.
Huh?
Yeah,
I said you'll know more about it than me right now. Yeah. I haven't played a board game in 2 freaking weeks. I'm going through withdrawals.
I know that feels like that's rough. I've been there recently.
Need to play.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I hope that you get your games in there, TC, but I know that might not be realistic at the moment. So just, keep strong, buddy. I hear you. I feel you.
It's all good. It's just like I said, everything's on the right track. This whole certification, it was like one check mark I had to do to be considered an applicant. It was like there was $180 out the window, and I had to go to one of the places where you have to pay to take the test. One of those testing centers where you're with everyone else. So I'm taking this test, going, okay, all this immunohistochemistry stuff, and I got someone next to me taking a words per minute test.
Just loud.
This sounds like basically all of the continuing ed crap you have to do as a teacher.
Yeah. Well, that sounds like the worst of the worst. That almost sounds like a Monty Python sketch. It's like, I didn't come here for an argument. This is only contradiction.
Yeah, this is why I never took professional development through an area education agency. I did all mine at the zoo.
I've been doing all this literally for 5 years, and they're like, well, you have to have this. So I'm like, God dang it, fine. How much? 180. Well, at least I got my income tax return.
For me, the continuing ed classes recently have actually been really eye-opening, and I think they have been ways to open my mind towards being a more understanding human being, and I think actually kind of moving me towards in a positive direction towards I guess where I want to be. So I guess that's maybe the idealistic view of them, but that kind of happened accidentally. So I stumbled upon
me being mad at half the people on the board game Twitters for that.
It's easy to get upset at board game people. I think my review might end up being a rant, but that's okay. Maybe it needs to happen.
All right. Well, we can get the show started then. If you're okay with that, I guess the only person I need to ask and see if he's okay is Trent, because I just want to make sure, Trent, that I hear. Hey, Trent.
Hey, what's up?
He's here. Hey, good to see you. Good to have you. I just realized that you haven't. Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right. 3, 2, 1. Hello and welcome to The Good, the Bored, and the Ugly, a podcast about board games. I'm the host of The Good, the Bored, and the Ugly, Joe Salin, joined tonight by Trent Ham. Hey, Trent, how you doing?
Pretty good, I guess. I hope to stay awake tonight.
I'm with you, Trent. I'm with you.
It sounds like that's going to be all of our goals. Well, yeah, for me, it's more like I hope to get enough sleep tonight because I'm leaving super early. So I guess the tired for me comes tomorrow morning. But I know that you're not the only one feeling that way, Trent, because TC Reed is here after having worked doubles and trained and gotten a certification. So now he is able to dissect a earthworm that has.
I'm just here to. This is my downtime for my few weeks of interesting work. So I'm just going to go with the flow, try to keep Trent awake, maybe talk semi-coherently about board games I haven't played in a while, but maybe reminisce a bit, like the good old days.
Won't make you think about work. Sorry about that, TC. I didn't mean to make you think about work there.
That's okay. That's okay.
Off limits when you're having the weeks that you've been. And I know that feeling because that has been my week. And for me, that the day after tomorrow it goes away. By the way, Andy, lazy people are on the show too.
Want to associate him with it? Okay, I won't review Clinic then.
Oh, nice.
Okay, pandemic's off limits. Clinic's off limits. Happy Heart Hospital's off limit. Whatever that game was. Yeah.
All right. I gotta check. Okay, no, my game still goes, and we're all good still for the most part. Well, and you just heard from Andrew Dennison, the last of us and the least of us.
Yeah, pretty much.
just roll over. Just like lie down. Well, Andy, I feel bad now. Like, no, he's actually not so bad most of the time. He's Andy Dennison. He's all right.
He's okay.
You'll be okay.
I'll go curl up and cry after the podcast. It's fine.
You can cry during the podcast. It's okay. Don't hold your feelings back on my account.
We're here for you. Like turn the corner here.
Tonight's topic: interventions.
Actually, the topic, speaking of which, is going to be variants, which maybe we need to try. Maybe tonight is going to be seen as a variant approach to our normal formula because of necessity more than anything. So grab your favorite cat and let's be ready to go here. We're going to hear some meows. Andy grabbed his cat. For those of you listening to the podcast, he was displaying the cat for all of us here.
Yeah, she was attacking the cords.
Oh, nice. And that's when you just play with it until finally it cuts through and you're like, oops, sorry, I can't be here anymore. And that's how you peace out.
Go to bed. Yes.
Yes, get to sleep. Woo. Well, we review board games here. Sorry, Andy. Sorry. What was that?
I said now she's attacking my feet in retribution.
Ooh, ouch. Well, what we normally do here when we're not doing the variant episode where we just all sort of gripe and moan and fall asleep midway through, we review board games, we talk about a topic in the hobby, and finally, hype games in this show, The Good, the Bored, and the Ugly. And tonight's topic will be game variants, the variants that we put on games and how our views towards them have continued to evolve and change as we've encountered different ones. So that will be our main thing. First, before we get started here, thanks to the sponsor here of The Good, the Bored, and the Ugly, Game Surplus. Check them out at GameSurplus.com, bringing the world of board games to you. So let's go ahead and kick off our reviews with an initial thoughts, which, of course, Andy has been popularizing. Let's go ahead and let's get kicked off with you, Andy, with an initial thoughts before we roll into the rant.
Yeah. All right, so some initial thoughts on some train gaming, except not 18X this time. This morning I got to break out the Crayon Rails, the classic Empire Builder. With Trent this morning, we played a 2-player game of it. We played a 2-player variant known as the Honeymoon variant that ups things, makes it a little bit nastier for 2 players. So if you have not seen the Crayon Rails games, these are still, they can be somewhat long, not quite 18xx length, I think, most of the time, unless you're playing with more than just a few players. But basically what you're going to be doing, real simple, there's a big old map, there's a lot of dots, you connect the dots to be your track, and then you move the train along the dots, a certain number of dots based on how fast your train is. You pick up some cargo in one city, you deliver it in a different city, and you deliver it based on these demand cards you have, which usually has 3 payouts on it for 3 different goods. One's usually like closer but pays less. Then there's a medium one, and then there's like, oh, we'll pay you a lot of money, but you're gonna have to go really far with it kind of one. There are some events that can happen. There are random events in it.
Oh yay!
Yeah. Well, I don't know. The one I got was pretty putatively nasty, but Trent got hit by another one, so that it's somewhat equaled out.
Sure.
But we did play with the random events because I did actually ask online what people thought of that, and like the general gist of anyone who likes Crayon Rails was you play with the events. You do not play with other people who say we're not playing with the events.
Wow.
So, the events basically the only thing that like throw a little spice into it. So they're not too god awful, other than the one I had, which caused me to just like lose a turn. That was bad, but they don't come up actually all that often because like you have this ginormous deck of cards that you're drawing from, which you get a lot more through that than you would think. But anyway, there's different kinds of cities on the board. They accept goods. You draw your little track. To win the game, you have to connect at least 5 of the major cities, and you have to be the first to $250 or $1 million when they use it, but 250 basically. And you just keep going back and forth until somebody pulls this off. Like I said, there's random events. It's basically a lot of logistics, route building, and kind of like optimizing your route with your deliveries and what you're trying to do. Honestly, it was a lot more crunchy than I was expecting it to be. Like, you know, as someone who's played a lot of 18X, I'm like, calculating routes, this is not going to be hard. And then I sit down and start actually trying to math out the cost of building track and everything, and I'm like, oh god, my head hurts already. So there was a little more crunchiness to it than I initially thought. Not really a whole lot of interaction, though, other than potentially maybe using someone's track. But there's really not a whole lot you could do to really like wreck somebody's day on it like you can with some of the 18xx games. There is a fair amount of downtime. I think with Empire Builder, most people say don't play this with more than 3 people. We played it with 2. I think I would have to agree. I don't think I would go higher than 3 on it, unless maybe you had like a side game going where you could play it when it's not your turn. Because yeah, it could be a long time between your turns, and if you end up in a situation where you just have to wipe your hand and draw 3 new cards, which I had to do a couple times, it's just even longer before it gets back around to you. So there can be some significant downtime. So if that's an issue for you, you may want to stay clear. Overall, like it felt to me like it was pretty crunchy. It was pretty thinky in the planning aspect to it. It wasn't really that tense. There's not a whole lot of like knees and elbows and things you can do to mess with other people. It was a much more relaxed thing. But even with the downtime and all of that, playing it at 2 players, like it took us probably about 2.5 to 3 hours. Bear in mind that Trent, I think, may have played one a long time ago, and this was my first Crayon Rails game, so there was a lot of getting used to the system. I think most people rate this as at about an hour per player. I think that's probably about right when you get experienced. But overall, it was a lot more crunchy than I thought it would be. It was a lot more enjoyable than I thought it would be. I bought it just kind of because they were all going out of print, so I'm like, now or never. I would definitely play this again, but if I were to rank it against other train game systems, this would probably rank at about the rank of the Winsome games for me, in that like 18xx is still my top, Age of Steam closely behind that, and then kind of a distant third, fourth would be the Crayon Rails games and the Winsome games. But if you had just 2 people, let's say, I think I would rather play Crayon Rails over 18xx. There's just not many of those that play good at low player counts. So that's kind of my thoughts so far on the Crayon Rails. I definitely want to play more of them. I want to play them again. I also have Empire Express, which is a pretty quick bells and whistles. Gets it down to about a 90 minutes. I bet my son could probably handle this game. And even if not now, in a couple of years for sure. So whereas 18xx isn't going to be there, isn't going to happen for a long time if it does. So anyway, that's kind of my thoughts on Empire Builder and Crayon Rails. Definitely interested. Definitely going to keep them around. If this sounds interesting to any of you out there, Mayfair Games was the one who made all of these. Mayfair does not exist anymore.
They do not. I looked for some Oh My Goods expansions, and good luck.
And the Crayon Rails games, I don't see these getting a reprint probably anytime soon. They just do not fit with the modern gamer and what they're looking for, I think, for a lot of them. So if it sounds interesting to you at all, get on eBay, get on Amazon, get on BGG, and find one that looks interesting and buy it. It's a system. There's a lot. There's like Martian Rails. There's
Dragon
Japan
Rails.
Iron Dragon Rails, where it's in the fantasy land. It's all good. Okay, last bit. I'm going to send a thank you out to Murr. He gave me a set of the metal pewter miniature trains to use with it, which was nicer than like the crappy plastic pond it comes with. So, but no, it was a good time. I want to try more of it, but it's definitely a very different beast from the real tense, knife your opponent train games that I'm often used to.
Yeah, I like the picture you guys sent me, where it was like the game was over. It looked like it was in a poster frame, right? Mm-hmm. And it was like all I got was and it was like the crayons, ... I was like, I know what they're playing.
Yeah, well, and I put it in the poster frame because you can draw on the board with the right kind of crayons and erase it. But being that these are probably gone for good, I wasn't willing to take that chance, so I put it under this poster frame and we used dry erase markers on it just to be safe. Just because I do know the boards can actually wear out over time, because Mayfair used to sell like posters of the maps that you could buy to replace. But yeah, no, it was pretty enjoyable. It was better than I thought I might like it or thought it would be, and so yeah, it was a good time. If it sounds interesting, try it out. But if it sounds interesting and you want to try it out, I wouldn't mess around on it, because there are more people than me like talking about Crayon Rails all of a sudden. And I've seen like getting Empire Builder could be pretty tricky. Like copies of it are running dry pretty fast.
Sure. Yeah. Trent, what do you have to add?
I would say my views are pretty similar to Andy's. I felt like it's a good logistics game. I felt like I have a friend of mine that Joe also knows and Andy knows that I think would surprisingly enjoy this quite a bit. I felt like there's a lot of planning ahead, especially in your routes and network building. You had to pay attention to more than I thought. Basically, Andy summed it up, and it was crunchier than I expected. There's more than just drawing line from city to the next city down the road. You don't want to do that. You got to be thinking about like what makes sense with the resources you have, and that doesn't necessarily mean just building to the next city. And it's a fun little game. It's got the issue of a lot of older games where sometimes you're gonna have some dude taking a 10-minute turn as they think through it. I don't think there's any way around that in this, because when you reach a major decision point in this game, there's like a lot of directions to go. And then on the other hand, there are turns where you don't really even have a decision. You just move your train 9 or 12 spots down the train and track and pass turn. So some turns are like 5 seconds, some turns are like 5 minutes. And I don't know how the system would ever solve that problem. I don't think even experienced gamers, I think they'd have experienced players of this type of game would have to sit back and do that. That's really my only downside with it, is the turn lengths are very variable.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of them say they'll play up to 5-6 people, but the general gist I've heard from a lot of people is 3 or less.
I wouldn't want to play something like this with 5 because you get maybe 2 people during that go round having the 5-minute turns, and it's not their fault. It's just on your turn.
It's just how
some of those turns you have, like you can literally draw any route you want on the board. That's the thing. You can draw anything you want. So there's a lot to think about when you've got 9 different goods that want to be delivered. And you've got 3 or 4 cities on the board that can produce that type of good. And you've got your network and you're trying to figure out how to link to any of those cities or if they're on your network or anything like that. It takes a while to process all that information. You can't do it instantaneously.
Yeah.
And so when you're actually making like a key decision in this game, it takes a little while. Where like so you got like the 5-minute turns. And then other turns when you don't have anything else to do other than get your train to the destination. Your turn is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Pass turn.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a drawback of the system. But if you get past that and you're okay and you play this with 2 or 3 players, I think it's a lot of fun, especially if you like network and logistic building games.
Yep.
It's great at that. That's what it's good at. It shines. I mean, it's a great example of that kind of game. Just be aware. Don't play it with more than 3. I think that would be miserable unless everybody knew what they were getting into, and everybody was kind of experienced. I might play it with 4. Other than that, I don't think I'd want to play it with 3. I don't think I'd want to play it with more than 3.
Yeah. And little trivia fact for your Euro gamers out there: Power Grid was originally a crayon rails game.
I can see that.
Yeah, I was about to say I could see that.
Yeah, originally that's what it was. It was little dots you drew, you filled in with crayons, man. That was how you built your power networks.
I actually saw the original Funkenschlag copy once. I did not buy it. I almost did. But yeah, I think that's what the original one was called, right? The Crayon Rails version that eventually got turned into Power Grid.
Yep.
Well, cool. Thanks, Andy and Trent, for that. And now, TC, you get your time to revisit a game based on who you think, on someone you think did not do the game justice in a review format.
Yeah, so. I was bored at work, and I made the mistake of opening my phone just to see what was on, and I went to a reviewer site, and they had a video called 8 negative review on board games. They picked 8 board games and gave them all negative reviews. I was like, whatever, maybe this will be entertaining. And one of them was Valparaíso, a game that I really enjoyed when I went to GameStorm about a month and a half ago. And as the game that we got the most plays when I was there, we played it like 4 or 5 times over that 4-day weekend. And I was just kind of stunned by it. Now, in this guy's defense, he did say that, he didn't have time to play it, and that other people would, and other people would like it, and that's fine. But it was like a brief minute and a half where basically he said the game was forgettable and brought no new or interesting mechanics to board gaming. And what else was there? It was like one of those it was an example of a dry Euro, more or less. And I was just like, man. So I just wanted to take a few minutes to set the record straight. And this is actually a really good game. And I think it's a shame that either it's getting blown off or it's getting only a minute and a half, because I would argue it does have some very interesting mechanics. They're not unique. I mean, they have mechanics that are a different take. And one of them is when you plan it's like Robo Rally, where you plan your actions, you have to plan ahead and you flip your cards over. But this has a neat twist where you can actually pay money to reverse the order of those cards in case you see someone's going to screw you over, right? Well, that's neat. It has trading in the Mediterranean, but when you go to these houses in the Mediterranean, what the action is going to take is like a list of 5. And once you take that action like goes to this pile up in the top front. It all shifts down. And you have a new action this thing's going to do. So you're like trying to trade goods and make money for victory points and all that. Then you can sail your boat to the Mediterranean or the sea to try to get these extra cards to use in your hand. And the whole thing's really interesting because you only play to 18 points, and then the whole game ends and you just add victory points, which I love because I'm not getting lapped on a freaking victory point track, which is like my big pet peeve in video games. Nothing will like detach me out of a game harder than seeing me get circled on the victory point track halfway through the game. Right, yep, I'm done. And it was, we played it over, and there were some really neat things going on. We liked it. And I don't again, I have to realize that there's different tastes for different people. But in general, it seems like games are, if it doesn't have plastic or a lot of bling to it, or like a really crazy theme that doesn't immediately grab your attention, then like some of these games are just getting shot off and thrown into oblivion and forgotten about. I remember when Chua came out, people said this won't last, and that became my absolute favorite game, and it has made a nice resurgence. When I picked up Rajas of the Ganges, that was a game when it came out, people blew it off, and that has got some legs, and I still really enjoy that one. So I'm telling you, if you guys are looking for a really interesting Euro game, don't listen to popular websites. Give Valparaíso a try. I know it's only an import. I know Game Surplus has a copy because I got it from them. And it's going to be, I think it's going to be released by Stronghold Games later, but I don't know. It may not be. I can't really get a finger on this.
Yeah, they're releasing it.
Are you sure? Because
yeah,
I can't. Sure. I heard maybe they were, and then I heard nothing after that. But I would love for you guys to try this game. Maybe I'm on an island. Maybe you guys will say, TC, this game is forgettable. I don't know what you're thinking about. But I know there's something there. Sometimes a Euro will grab me that's doing some cool things. And if a game that generally doesn't have a good theme grabs my attention, it's because the mechanics are good. I'm like a huge theme guy, right? I'm like, sure. Oh, I love theme. So when a themeless game comes along and I see it doing some cool things, I'm like, that's pretty neat. I like that. Village was a nice one that kind of got poo-pooed on, where you're taking cubes off the board. It was like a cube takement instead of a worker placement thing. Really crazy stuff going on in that one. So please, please, please give Valparaíso a try. I think it's got merit. I think it's good. Don't let the artwork or the trading in the Mediterranean. Or
it's got good art, dude. It's Michael Menzel, so it's artwork.
Good art.
Stone Age.
Oh yeah. Plus, it's placed in Chile, so there's no Mediterranean.
Yeah, Valparaíso is.
Wait! I thought it was placed in Indiana.
Was that Valparaiso? There's a Valparaiso, Indiana? Okay,
it could be.
There's a university there.
Okay.
If he can visit Trading Post, maybe.
Well, thanks TC for that. For giving us the update. And I actually, believe it or not, watched this video prior to knowing that you were going to do this at all. This 8 negative game reviews, because I was like, hold on, this is not a format I've come to expect. And what I learned, the same as you said, is that this is kind of 8 games that would take a lot more to review than what he's willing to do. And it seems like, at least giving these, saying it's a negative game review is, I don't know, there's one that I didn't even think was negative that he gave. It was more just like he had some sort of a mental block about it.
Yeah.
And it was like that Peacemakers one, something Fate of the Peacemakers or something. And it was just basically he said, I have a mental block about what you're doing in this game. And for that reason, I think that it's a great game and I won't ever review it because of my mental block. That's what I heard. He's like, because the idea is that you're supposed to be this sort of, like a not involved party that's trying to get these two forces to fight each other to a stalemate. That's the point of the game. And so that premise upset him. Tom Bassel in this review, 8 negative game reviews. Now I will say there's 2 things that I'll comment about the other 6 games in this that haven't been talked about, because I didn't really have anything to say about most of them. They made sense. He's took a flicking game that basically looked like flicking ASL, which sounds about as bad as it's to me as it was to him, which is here's a flicking game with a buttload of rules, and it's no way that I want to have to learn all the different rules for line of sight when the game is literally about dexterity, right? So a lot of it made sense, but I would say that he was specifically wrong about one game in his characterization, I believe, and that was Dungeon Alliance, which he compared to Gloomhaven, which I believe Dungeon Alliance is much more apt to be compared to Mage Knight, unless maybe Tom Bassel believes that Mage Knight is the same as Gloomhaven, which would show how mistaken he is, because those are very different games. Dungeon Alliance is more like Mage Knight meets Arcadia Quest. And really, if you've played those 2 games, which there's probably very few people that have played and enjoyed both of those, for me, Mage Knight is much more of an enjoyable experience than Arcadia Quest, which I still have played and enjoyed. But anyway, if you can imagine making Arcadia Quest work in a more mage-like puzzle, logistics puzzle, that's Dungeon Alliance. He's right about the generic theme, and I think that it especially comes through as a generic theme, that the artwork is very amateurish and done by people who have the same last name as the designer. Like probably a really good job for amateur art, but I don't think he did himself favors in that specific department. But anyway, I think he was very wrong about Dungeon Alliance and his characterization. However, he said almost the exact same thing where he's like, this game is like Gloomhaven, but it's not Gloomhaven, about Perdition's Mouth, Abyssal Rift. And to be fair to Tom Vassell, I had the exact same feeling. And I played Perdition's Mouth like probably 5 or 6 times before Gloomhaven came out. Then I played Gloomhaven, and I was like, with what Gloomhaven's trying to do, Perdition's Mouth does almost the same general idea. And I actually really prefer Gloomhaven's style, and I think that Perdition's Mouth just had a lot of different ways that the system choked up that Gloomhaven did not. So I agreed with one of his negative quote-unquote game reviews, in that Perdition's Mouth really is like a more of a dark fantasy, lesser version of Gloomhaven. So, but I'm not reviewing these games, TC. I'm just,
Well, I just wanted to say Valparaíso was not forgettable, at least to me, because I found it intriguing enough. I played the freaking thing 4 times over a weekend, and I loved every single play. And I was like, dude, I want to try this other thing. Tried it. Okay, that worked. Okay, that one didn't work. I want to play it again. Okay, this no, we gotta play this again. This is cool. So it definitely wasn't forgettable for me. Sure. Maybe if I had a pile of games I had to get through, it would be, but I had a good time with it.
Well, thanks, TC. And it certainly makes sense that you would want to fight for the reputation here. You're like carrying a bucket of paint to the top of water tower. So let's now hear from Trent with a short solo game, and we'll see whether or not the review clocks in at the same playtime of 10 minutes.
Yeah, 10 minutes is about the right playtime for this. I'm going to review Maiden in the Forest, which has been in my pocket for about the last 2.5 weeks. Maiden in the Forest is a 18-card solo game. It doesn't require anything else other than those 18 cards. And it's one of those where a lot of it comes down to, it's basically a replayable puzzle is what it is. So what you basically do is you set up 12 cards in a ring on the table. Each one of them depicts a tree of a certain color and also depicts a symbol on it. Each of the tree colors there's 4 different tree colors: red, blue, green, yellow, and there's 4 possible symbols, but each of the tree colors has a unique set of the 3 symbols. So like the red ones might have the symbols A, B, and C, and the blue ones might have B, C, and D, and the green ones might have A, C, and D. So each one of them is missing a different one of the symbols. So it isn't a perfect, each color doesn't have all the symbols. Each symbol doesn't have all the colors. You got the idea. So you make those as a ring of 12. And then there's a 13th card that's a Maiden that goes around the middle of it. It's basically, all the Maiden does is basically your turn count. You have 12 turns of which to win this game. And essentially what you're doing with the remaining cards is they give you a particular rule for the round that you're able to do. So one of them will say you can't use this symbol or particular symbol. And then the other 3 tell you something you can do to manipulate the cards. Either you can swap any 2 cards, or you can swap cards that are adjacent to each other, or you can swap cards that have the same symbol or the same color. They have those types of options on them. So each one of those has a symbol on it. So what you do at the start of a round is you take one of those, and that means you can't touch a card that has that symbol on it. And so each one of those 4 action cards has a symbol on it. You take one of them, play it right off the bat and randomly, and it says you can't touch cards with that symbol in any way. You can't score them. You can't do anything with them. So then the other 3, you have to manipulate cards in the ring. Okay? So you're swapping cards around and so on. And their orientation is important. You have to maintain the orientation of the cards. At the start of the game, all the roots of the cards are inwards towards the middle. And you have to maintain that orientation because the orientation will change. Then after that, after you play the cards as you want and you're done, you have an option to flip the cards that are in the ring. So you look at the any 2 cards that are across from each other. If they have either the same color or the same symbol, you can rotate them. And what rotate it means is turn them 180 so that the head is inwards, both of the cards. Or if the tops of the trees are already inwards, you can flip them over. Once they're flipped over, they're like dead cards. They have any space. They're just taking up space at that point. So you can look at all 6 of the possible pairings and see if there's any of those that you can do. And then you can do the same with every 4th card. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 around the ring. Do they have something in common in sequence? So this card A and card B have a symbol or a color in common. Then do card B and card C have a symbol and color in common? Symbol or color in common, and the same with C and A. If you can find a set of all three of those that have that, then you can flip all three of those. Then you do it again for any four, and you can do it for all the possible rotations on the thing. So you're looking at a bunch of different permutations at once for that. You get those flipped, you keep moving the maiden, and then at the end of the round, you move the maiden once to indicate that you've taken a turn, and you do it again and again and again. Your goal is to get all of the cards face down in the ring. So you've got to basically access them all twice. Once to rotate them from the root inward to the top of the tree inward, and then once to flip them over. My win percentage of this is about 50%. It's very much an observation game and thinking ahead game. You've got to be looking for patterns the whole time. And you can't just go for the obvious, like, this will flip the most cards. If you do that every time, you'll lose. If you just go for the thing that will flip the most cards, I guarantee you'll lose. Because you'll end up in situations like, you're at the end of the game and there's only one card that hasn't been flipped over, well, you lose. Because you have no way to flip it over because there's nothing to pair it with. So, there's actually a lot more going on than you think at the first glance of the game. You'll sit down, you'll think it's simple, and you'll play through it, and you'll be like, why didn't I win? And then you'll start seeing that, hey, there's more going on here, and it starts to peel itself like an onion, and that makes it a really fun little thinky game. The only complaint I have about it is, because you're laying 12 cards out in a clock-like shape, you do have to have some table space. This wouldn't fit on like an airline tray. You wouldn't be able to play on like an airplane or something. But on like any side of like dinner table or something like that, or my game table, it's not even remotely a problem. It's a very nice little solo game to keep in your pocket. Play when you have 10 minutes and a little bit of table space. It's published by Button Shy Games. You can get it off their website. And the art is really nice. Can't say more nice things about it. The designer, if I like a game, I think the designer deserves credit, and that's Todd Sanders. I highly like it. It's worth the, $10 you pay for it?
Yeah, Bud Shy's cheap.
Yeah.
Like 15 or less, usually.
Yeah, I really like it. It's a good little solo game. It's been in my pocket for about two or 3 weeks, and I pulled it out quite consistently.
Mm-hmm. Well, cool. With this one being 10 minutes and sounding like the design itself is, like emergent as you play, where you're like, why did I lose that? Or why didn't I win? And then you're just kind of like learning things as you go. It sounds like there's things to discover in this little game.
There's not a whole lot of luck to it. You know what all the cards are. You know where they all are. There's nothing hidden for you. It's the only thing that's hidden is each round, which symbol will be the symbol you can't touch, and thus which 3 cards do you have for manipulating the cards in the circle. That's all there is for luck in this game. There really isn't much luck. It comes down to your ability to observe. And I've enjoyed that a lot.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
Actually, that sounds pretty cool for a little solitaire game.
I like it. I was really impressed.
Well, that was The Maiden in the Forest. And now I'm going to round it out with a tiny review of a game that is actually not as tiny as it sounds. It's called Tiny Towns and was already reviewed on this podcast by Eric Buscemi when he was our guest to talk about Punchboard Media. So Tiny Towns is a game about filling in a 4x4 grid with different buildings that score you different amounts of points. The way that you fill that grid is every turn, a single player will say a certain color of cube, and every player at the table will take that color of cube and place it somewhere in their 4x4 grid. Once you have a certain pattern of different colors of cube next to each other, you have the ability to, even if it's not your turn, build a building from the 7 available different buildings that are all made of different patterns, like a blue next to a yellow, next to a red, and an L-shaped, which actually is the one type of building that will be constant throughout every single game of Tiny Towns that you play. It's called a cottage, and it will score points if it is fed. So anyway, the ways that these buildings score points will be like a cottage scores points if it's fed, and then there's a building that feeds it. But each of those, there's 4 different types of building that feed it, and you'll only play with one in every game. But it might be that it feeds everything in the row and column, or it feeds 4 no matter where they are, or it feeds any contiguous group, or the ones surrounding it. All the 8 surrounding it. So there's many different sort of flavors of different types of ways that these buildings can score, but they're all kind of like connected together, it would seem. So, there's one type of building is like it has 5 cubes in its pattern, and it's like a trading post type building, and they're always very, very, big buildings to build, but they give you like a special ability to use throughout the game. One of which is like when a certain color of cube is called, you can actually take whatever cube you want, which is a pretty cool ability. So, I mean, there's different types of buildings, and basically, though, that format of just when it's my turn, I choose a color of cube, and everybody takes it and places it is a very slick, easy to get into system where the interaction is still there without ever being like mean, because it's like, you'll sometimes look at another player's, like what I would do sometimes is look at another player's like town and see like, well, they're really flush with yellow cubes, and I know that the one thing you really don't want in this game is a ton of the cubes of the same color, because that sucks and it's hard to make patterns because none of the patterns are all yellow or anything like that. So I'll call a yellow cube because I've already used my yellow cubes and other things, because I didn't, I sort of kept my town clean of the waste of these extra little cubes that can get placed there. A 4x4 grid is pretty tight. It's larger than I originally thought it would feel, but it's pretty tight because whenever you build a building, you choose any of the previous locations of cubes as the final resting spot of that building. So places will fill up and then empty as you play this game. But ultimately, I am super, super positive about Tiny Towns. Like it is a blast. Every time we've played it through every single card in the game. So there's 4 different options. There's 6 different types of buildings that change, and then one that stays constant. And there's 4 different cards for each of those. So your total potential like combinations in this game is 4 to the 6th. Every time we play it, it seems like we always do random, 4 different random or 6 different random ones, and we just keep playing until we've gone through all the different cards. It seems like that's like a good amount that gets you about an hour and a half or so of playing, because each game of this, though it says 30, I think it says like 45 to 60 on the box. I find that this clocks in at like 30 minutes when, especially the people that know what they're doing. I'm loving Tiny Towns. Find a copy of it. It's already starting to disappear from different online merchants. And we're trying to get Carmen at Game Surplus to get it in his store. But anyway, I just like to say that Tiny Towns is worth it. It's a small box game that has a big box. It's like a super filler that has like a big box footprint, nice chunky wooden pieces, and really cool ways of doing replayability, as well as the one problem that you might think when you first start playing this game. And Trent, you said it out loud, and I had thought this the first time I played too, which is like, okay, well, since we're all playing with the same color of cube, couldn't we kind of do that thing where we just all build the same building and then we just all kind of keep pace with each other and build the same town? And the one thing that changes that up is that you're dealt at the beginning of the game a like monument, which is a specific card to you. You get dealt 2 cards and you choose one of them, and then that is a special building that only you can build, and you can only build it once. And you'd be surprised how different the towns end up turning out. There's not really that much that's the same in these, and I think that just that little wrinkle of the monument definitely does away with any possibility for that. So I think Tiny Towns is fantastic. I think that it is like I said before, a super filler, and I recommend it highly.
Yeah, I've heard that this is getting some fairly surprising reviews, and I've talked to a few people since I haven't played games. I've talked to people who played games, and they've really enjoyed this one. It's kind of surprised me, to be honest.
Mm-hmm. Definitely check it out, TC, if you get a chance to play. I mean, it'll feel like you're getting so much game in such a short amount of time, especially if you're really pressed for time. It's really got a sweet thing going for it. So I've come out really positive for this one here. And from what I understood, Trent, and you played it 4 times with me, I wonder if my positivity hasn't cast a shroud over your overall feelings. That can happen.
I feel like it's a really good lightweight game. It's a lightweight Euro is definitely what I would classify it as. It reminded me of a 2D version of Alvin Biard's Town Center, whereas Town Center requires you to be building in 3D. This is a strictly 2D affair, and like it makes it easier to mentally process some of what's going on in the game state. I enjoyed it, and I really liked how it does variable setup wonderfully, and it makes it like this game is easily expandable with like a deck of cards that feels like a huge expansion for this game. That's clever design. It's designed so that if they came out with a deck of cards for this, it would feel like a huge expansion. And that's pretty impressive to me. But like I said, it felt like out of the base game, I'm definitely on the lighter end. It's one I feel like I would have a good time introducing my family to. My 9-year-old, 11-year-old, 13-year-old, they would all enjoy this game. I could see us playing it as a family. The game night, it feels like a filler, but a filler I won't object to. That's probably about where I would put it. I liked it.
Sure. Yeah, I'm not hearing. I haven't heard that many positive things about it. It's just mainly me that's really positive on it, and that's. I mean, it's just been my personal experience.
I've heard lots of positive on it.
I've been living in a cocoon though, so I'm not like whatever hype that I just shoveled on top of Tiny Towns has been just for me. It is not coming from anywhere else. It's rare that a game comes out at game night and gets played again, then again, and then next week the same game comes out and gets played again and again and again and again, and I'm cool with it and I'm happy with it, and I feel like I'm comfortable with that having happened, and I feel like there was nobody who was like, do we have to play it again? I feel like we were all pretty cool with it.
This game night, I played one game 4 times and another game 3 times. That's pretty weird at game night.
Yeah. That's uncommon. For sure. Well, that rounds out our reviews. And so now let's talk about some game variants. This is something that we already touched a little bit on, that like these can be very divisive. When you put a variant specifically in a game, we're talking about either official or unofficial. I don't think, I'm not going to draw a line between what we can and can't talk about, because I think a lot of designers sort of acknowledge that like there are different play styles, and they want to make a game, accessible to, not just accessible, but like appealing to as many people as possible. Or at least that's what I see, if you're a career designer. Now, of course, what a variant can do sometimes is risk like, there being seemingly a confused direction of what a game is actually supposed to be and what it's supposed to offer. And I think one of the main examples I'd give for this is that like there's a house rule, there's like, what's the difference between a variant and a house rule? Because I think people consider in Bonanza the original Uwe Rosenberg game that anybody who's a hater says is Uwe's best game. That's like the backhanded compliment they give. In that game of Bonanza, you're not allowed to reorder the cards in your hand from left to right. Everybody plays with that, but there is a rule about only being able to trade specifically with the person whose turn it is. And I know that with certain groups, they try to play that you can trade with, that any trade can kind of happen, or that you can sort of like make a third party trade if that makes the trade happen on your turn. And then I've heard that is, a house rule that ruins the greatness that Bonanza is. So, I mean, like where you've got some groups that say I won't play with it, other groups say I won't play without it. Andy, what I'm referring to is that earlier in the show, you reviewed Empire Builder and said that the online consensus about events is that you don't play without them and you don't play with the people who don't play without them, which is a pretty harsh thing to say. And it sounds like you got a lose a turn situation from an event card. And I would hear, to put you under, to put your what you said earlier under the surgical knife of my misguided brain. I think the only reason that you accepted that, because I've heard you say before, Andy, on this show, that the worst mechanism in the game is lose a turn. That happened to you due to the events in Empire Builder. And I would say that if there wasn't such a vocal community telling you that this is the only way to play it, the right way to play it, I think you might have looked at that and said, I had a bad time with it. That sucked.
Well, to be fair, it was only because I was by Mexico City.
Okay.
Yeah, to point out what goes on is a lot of the lose a turn cards in this game are you near this city? If so, lose a turn.
Okay.
And that's what a lot of the random events are. Like, are you near Mexico City? If yes, lose a turn.
So maybe knowledge of the deck would be something that like
it's a little bit knowledge of the deck, and I think and Mer's saying like you can do some timing with how you do your deliveries and stuff to minimize that as a potential threat.
Yeah, you kind of want to be out in the middle of nowhere a lot in between turns if you can. That would make sense.
Yeah, and also like a lot of people really get mad at the flooding breaking your track, to which then a lot of people respond, why do you keep building over rivers?
Yeah, that happened to me. I had flooding break 2 of my tracks. That was a good time.
But I think for the most part, like I don't prefer lose a turn. And for example, one of the variants, which is now sort of the official way to play it, is in the Estates, or what was Neue Jaime. Neue Jaime used to have those roof tiles, and there were like 4 blank ones, and if you drew it, it basically said it was like you lose your turn in Neue Jaime, which you don't get that many anyway. But and basically nobody played with it. Well, there was some, because there was a lot of people that complained about Capstone not including those. But a lot of people wouldn't play with them. They would just play a variant where they would just take those out. So I think in some cases, yeah, it might be an issue. I don't know. An Empire Builder, like, I think it would have bothered me more. Like, I could have blamed my loss more on that, other than Trent got nailed by another event where he couldn't deliver in Seattle. So
yeah, I do. You said you can't deliver in Seattle, and I had my train way over by Seattle, so I just wasted a turn just sitting outside of Seattle.
So oh god, and then there was like one event we drew that we were both affected by. Like, we both lost 2 turns, so it's like, okay, I do nothing, you do nothing. Okay, continue.
You just sat there and waited.
Yeah, it like literally did nothing against it. But I think for me, like, variants, one kind of variant I think I'm almost always good with is any variant or house rule that allows more player choice. So for example, I don't know if you'd call a variant or a house rule, but when I play Three Kingdoms Redux, the base way you draw cards is you just draw and keep what you take. I always do whatever it says to draw 1 more than that, discard 1 to just get a little more choice into that game. I almost always approve of that. Like, when I play Terraforming Mars, even though I think it probably lengthens the game out quite a bit, I would never want to play that without drafting. Like, I want the draft. I want that choice. So those
Same
are
with Agricola. I would say I would kind of like say, like, with Agricola, I want to draft those cards. I don't, and I know that that's an original variant. And now when you crack into the new Agricola's rulebook, it acknowledges that, like, that variant play is, the popularity of it, and it lists many variants, because Agricola, like, there's sometimes where variants are listed in a rulebook, and it's like, a community has literally formed around playing the game in certain ways, and then the rulebook now reflects that by including variants. And, and then there's other ones that are still sort of in the organically developing stage, which, Agricola was in for many years because there was no draft variant out of the original rule book.
Yeah. That was kind of like Empire Builder. There was like, and I even have like an older edition than the newest one, because that's like all that was available at the time. But there's like 8 or 10 variants in the back of it that are like what the community has accepted and settled upon as acceptable variants, I guess. Because we played one, Trent and I used a variant that is supposed to be like tighten things up a little bit for 2 players, make it so it's not quite so open. And I could see where, that made it a little bit more crunchy. So there's that. I don't know. I'm trying to think of situations where there was really bad variants.
Well, okay. While you're thinking of that, Andy, I got a question for everybody.
Yeah.
Like, so there's sometimes where a game is literally designed from the ground up with, like, a cooperative game type. I mean, it's almost like, at that point is, where do we draw the line between a game type and a variant? Like, there's
Right.
Because there's a lot of games that have a cooperative variant that people who swear, and I think a lot of times that sort of co-op, semi-co-op, competitive is a lot of times where those variants get specifically, sort of morph into much more, like, there's a much more intentionality from the designer, because they understand that, like, when people sit down for an experience, there are a lot of people that are like, I don't play cooperative games, straight up. And by turn of the same coin, there's a lot of people who are like, I love playing co-ops. Like, co-ops are what I go for, and there's like reasons behind, like, what you're looking from an experience in terms of, like, whether or not you want to work, like, be, as some people see it, forced to work together, versus, like, on the other side where you are, like, always at each other's throats. And to me, it just depends on the game, right? Like, in Mage Knight, I don't want anybody fighting me, because I think that the fighting each other in that game is just, like, it's counterproductive to what I play Mage Knight for, which is to build. Like, I feel like I'm, like, playing a building game where I'm building just, like, this amazing hero, And if you play competitively, it's like all you do is just slow that process. And it's like, no, I don't want that stuff slowing me down. The only things I want slowing me down are when I take on too much and I got to take wounds because I sucked, or when I make poor decisions. Like, I don't want it because you came over here and were like, swat, swat, take a bunch of wounds.
Which clog your hand up.
Yeah,
which is just
all
like,
they do is just make things harder.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. I think in that one, I tend to swing that way with Mage Knight as well. The other one I was thinking of that kind of falls into that category, but I haven't really played around with it enough to know what the differences are, is PAX Emancipation. The Sierra Madre from this year has a competitive, cooperative, fully cooperative, and it's kind of like where you end the game. So the way it works is like you're all playing cooperative until you're not. So so like you've got to get, it's really weird because like to go past it, you've got to get everybody working together, but then it becomes about like, but who was better at it?
Yeah. What about, like a game like a Sewell? Because, I mean, some games will have multiple boards, and you could look at multiple boards for a game as being like, oh, this is the variant map. You could call it a variant map. And in a Sewell, you've got the one side of the map, or no, not the map, but, whatever it is, it's the wall-hanging blueprint, the one that gives you all the different locations that the tiles need to go. And, it's like you can't make mistakes on that side. You can't ever set yourself up for an impossible wall hanging. Whereas if you play on the side where, like if you're an experienced player, you should only be able to score higher on the blank side because, you have the options of starting it wherever you need to. And there's no longer like this sort of benefit of certain tiles in certain places because, they've got multiple directions that they grow out from, as opposed to ones that are in like the corner that have less options, less flexibility. You can start wherever you want. And so, I mean, like when I played, it does seem like people, like if you know the game, there almost always is one person in the group, at least in what I've played, that was like, no, we only play with this. I only play on the variant side, the open side, right? Like that's the way to play it. That's the way you play it. And I think that's the experienced player variant. But that's certainly not always how I've, every time that I've played. There's other times when like they're like a beginner variant to a game.
I hate those.
I was thinking of Rajas of the Ganges has there's a variant on that where you they have that whole game you play and it's like, oh, by the way, here's the extra stuff you add on later as a variant to, flip the board, your player boards over and do more things and more chits come out and it changes a few rules. And it seemed to me that's the way they designed the game to be played, and they just made this beginner variant to get familiar with some of the mechanics of the game.
Mm-hmm. I think in like Marco Polo, I actually am the Voyages of Marco Polo has, like its quote unquote beginner variant to me is almost like the balanced variant because like there are like the locations in the game that give you income are specifically in starting spots. Right. And so like the hardest one to get is like what I would say, you could make arguments that each of these can be better, but like one of them is you can have whatever spot you want. So literally like it is the best spot and they put it in a specific area. So that way it's like tougher to get to, it's kind of like out in the nethers, whereas that could end up in any spot if you just did it randomly. And I think what ends up happening is you end up with in Marco Polo, at least, there are some very important decisions that can happen early. And some of those decisions are publicly balanced where it's like I'm drafting this person and then it's going to be inverse to my player order. And other decisions are like, where you just draw a hand of 4 cards and you hope that you get the locations you need to go to. And I just feel like when it comes down to it, like, it's sometimes they say beginner. And in this case, I'm not so certain that it is just beginner because I have had some experiences with Marco Polo where it felt just kind of like, well, the person that got to draft their dude first won this, because it's just like they're going to start across the map and all the good stuff is there. Whereas I think that it's more balanced when you do the quote unquote beginner version. Or
you can, use the expert variants for donning the purple like we did.
Well, Another question I have is when this topic of variants came up, I'm going to try to get Trent involved in this conversation a bit. I've been doing research on Dune just to see how Rex implemented things differently, and there are a ton of variants out there for Dune. There was like 2 expansions, I believe, for it, the Duel and Harvest. Is that what? Yeah, and I am just curious as all get out what this reprint's going to have as in terms of official rule set.
Okay. I've actually got some insight on this.
Thank you.
The initial release of it is going to be just the base game that basically it's going to be just the base game that Avalon Hill released, more or less. It's gonna. It looks like, from what I've seen, it's going to have the art of the popular print and play of it, but the art looks much more like the popular print and play than the original Avalon Hill version. But it's going to be very similar to that. Now, they're going to expand this, and I think they're going to expand it with a lot of the variants and expansions that are out there. A lot of them are... It's hard to really tell where the rights with a lot of this stuff actually are.
I know, it's like all in limbo. Like, for example, the original game, no matter how many people in Alliance had appeared, as long as three strongholds were held, you won the game. So like this crazy situation could occur where if this alliance came up and you could convince 3 people who hold a stronghold each, you got your 3 strongholds, they won the game. They fixed that in various revisions that aren't official that got implemented into Rex, where it scales up, where like one has to hold 3, 2 has to hold 4, and 3 has to hold 5. But I think reading the original rules, that was not in the original game.
No, it was not. The original rules was like any alliance that has 3 strongholds, alliance wins. That was more akin to how diplomacy worked, where like as long as all the players in the game voted for an alliance of players, that alliance won.
Yeah.
So if basically like 3 players decided we're kind of tired of playing and we want to win, and there's a 4th player in that says no, the 3 players would just wipe him off the board and then vote for themselves.
Yeah.
I suspect the rulebook will have a couple game variants right in the rulebook for the base game. However, I would be shocked, given the number and quality of ideas and expansions that are out there, and I've looked into this too, that some of those are going to see their way into expansions for this. Now, I don't know where all the rights lay, but I feel like there's enough good out there that some of this will see the light of day in official versions.
Yeah, like the betrayal cards in Rex are unique to that game, and I couldn't find any of those in any Dune variants. So I was like, is that going to be involved with this reprint? I mean, so I'm like, in terms of variants, this whole, I'm curious where all this is going to land.
I suspect when you go by the version that Gale Force 9 is going to put out at Gen Con and shortly thereafter, that you're going to mostly get the Avalon Hill version. You're going to get something extremely similar to that, maybe with a small variant or 2. And then I think, from what I've been saying around the forums, there's Gale Force 9 is talking to people that have made variants in the public domain.
Cool.
So they want to put some of those in there. Is what I've heard from a couple people, is that some of the more popular variants, Gale Force 9 has been sniffing around them for expansion. So...
Well, you know what your job is at Gen Con, then you got to rip open that copy as humanly possible, scan that rule book, and let me know what's going on.
Well, I mean, my wife and I already agreed that if there's a game we're getting at Gen Con, it's Dune. So
sweet.
No, I mean, I think, also kind of going back to it, like I really don't particularly like intro game variants. Like, the 3 examples of this that I really don't care for. First one, Arkwright. Spitting Jenny. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Don't.
No. Yeah. Spitting Mule, maybe, but like Waterframe is where the game is at. That's the game. Anything else is to just try to get you up to speed. Agricola, playing Agricola without the cards.
Oh,
no. You didn't have to say anything.
Maybe that's
expression was said it all.
Or the other one for me is the variants for Lignum. Like, I've never played with them. I never will, in the sense that there's like a variant where you choose or like whatever with the clearings that I don't care so much about. The ones I'm talking about is where they have the basic, advanced, and like expert game, where it's obvious that the expert is the game. So like in some of the intro games, they do things like removing the planned worked cards. And to me, like that's the game, like how to take advantage of that. So the way I play that is like, no, we're including these, and if you don't want to think about it, fine, skip that spot
and lose.
Mm-hmm. Well, what I would say to balance out what you just said, Andy, I think that there is some very, very big truth in what you said. I know that might sound shocking considering the source, but here's the thing. I've been scrolling down here the top games on BGG, and I'm really not finding that many games that have that many variants. I mean, you could call like there are games that have what I would consider maybe like a sort of sliding level of complexity that's trying to get people in. And so for those intro variants, sometimes that's the step that people need to get in, right? And I think that there is some truth in many cases, specifically in Lignum, because I think it was, kind of an odd duck because it was a heavy game released by a children's game company. And so there was like special pains taken to make it digestible. And I think that in many of the things that they took away in those intro variants are really where the game lies. Now, like to contrast that though with a game like Cerebria, which is one that we're still cracking into in our group, like there is, like what I would consider to be the full game of Cerebria, could or could not involve you crafting your deck in advance out of this card pool that and have studied and have played with, playing with a unique power that is different from everybody else's and has a special ability. And then there is an additional sort of like what you do when you can't do the main goal, like when your private goal and the main and the public goal is like kind of unattainable, there's still ways to earn points. And that's considered a variant that I've never even played with, but I'll tell you straight up, the complexity of that game has certainly lended itself to just learning that game and making that learning experience a positive experience is, like that by itself, because it's so different than so many games, right? Like,
quick one to jump in here about Cerebria. I demoed that at Gen Con a couple years ago, and my impression was that game was really light. And that demo missold that game badly.
Really?
Yeah, they gave me the impression that game was really light, because what they did is they set everything up. They made a lot of the pregame decisions for you. They had a game scenario that was like, felt very on rails.
Okay.
And it gave the impression of a much lighter game than it actually is. I walked away from it thinking this is the first time I feel like a game by Mind Clash was a dud. And now I have actually played it and I'm like, dude,
whoops.
Seems like fairly pretty heavy. Like it's quite heavy. And that was not the impression I got at Gen Con. So sometimes don't judge a game entirely by its demo, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Or that intro variant, And I would say that I think you're right, Trent, in saying like just the don't judge a game is a really good mantra to have. And I think that like if you're starting to, to pull back from a gaming experience before you've given it a chance, maybe a variant will get you into it. And then in many cases, that initial variant, like that got me to play a game, turned out to be enough to get me interested to then realize that like my variant was just me being silly and imagining a problem that wasn't even real, or trying to specifically say, I want this from this game, which is really not fair, because what a game looks to deliver and where a game, is birthed is not in your mind, but rather in the mind of its creator and in the play style of its creator. So maybe you can find that you'll have an appreciation for that, and maybe it's the variant that gets you into it. So by all means, if you're attached to a certain idea and a game absolutely does something contrary to what you see yourself as looking for, go ahead, variant it up. And I'm sure that designer will feel when it comes down to it, maybe it wasn't the game experience that they intended, and so they won't feel responsible necessarily for if you love or hate the game. But at the same time, they will probably feel happy that you at least were able to give their game a chance, considering that there's been very rare experiences where I've ever felt like, like I sort of reached out to a designer and said, this is something I dislike, and I'd really like a variant for it. And the designer just comes back with like, it's not me, it's you. It's, like it's not the game, it's you. So I think like, play the variant if you want, play the intro variant if you're feeling comfortable with it. But like, man, when it comes to difficulty in games, like I'm dealing with this right now in one of the video games I play, and like, holy crap, dude! Like I'm so normal. Like I should say, I'm so normal that I always choose normal difficulty. And if a game forces, like if a game's normal difficulty is like soul crushingly hard, I start wondering what's wrong with me. And that's in many cases.
Don't play the original XCOM game.
Okay. Well, there's a lot of different games where like the easy mode, like I remember I read something online because I was like, trying to puzzle out like, what do I just suck? Am I stupid here? And like one of the first things it said to enjoy this game, play it on easy. Like play it on easy until you're comfortable with it. And I was like, okay, now I can finally go play it on easy. Now that I've got the validation of somebody on the internet, I can go and play this game on easy. Because, like otherwise my pride would be too damaged and I would just keep on losing at like, the first scenario I play and feeling like, oh, I hate this because I don't really know what I'm doing. And I won't go ask for directions because I've got this. And so anyway, when it comes down to it, like that game's easy is what I would consider most games normal. It can feel easy at times, but then at the same time, there are weird difficulty spikes where I'm like, oh God, I just lost. And I'm still playing it on easy. Wow, that just means I suck. But and that's the sliding difficulty level. It's not even a variant. But like, making the change that resulted in me enjoying the game, which can be through a variant or through like something that's as easy as turning sliding the difficulty down or maybe sliding it up if you feel like the game is too easy. You can make a variant that does that. So I mean, I think they just appreciate the fact that a variant can tailor a game towards your experience. And at the same time, though. The top games on Board Game Geek, the ones that are in the top, I've been scrolling through all the top 500, and like I'm thinking, these are games where the purpose that the designer set out is generally what people appreciate the game for. And I think that sort of like sometimes variants can get into the weeds where like a designer sort of loses, like their intentionality of like, what did you mean to design in this game? And it's like, well, I meant to design it for everybody. And it's like sometimes in trying to please everybody, you end up kind of doing a 504.
Not
a 180. A 504.
I did it. Sorry. I remember that game.
504 was the game name, right? The Freedom and Peace one.
Yeah. 504 games of okayness.
Yeah, it's like 10 variants. Choose 3 of them, and then see how that works. And it's like, and then. Well. I have silenced the room, and that is either the snoring that you are hearing or the silence is affirmation, as my grandmother always used to say. The old sales technique.
It's exhaustion. I apologize.
It's exhaustion.
It's exhaustion. I think I spent all my energy talking to Trent about Dune, and now I'm just done.
Fair enough.
That's all we're saving it for.
Well,
before we get to hype, because I really want to do this, like. Just to do quick, what's your favorite variant in a game?
Favorite variant in the game.
Oh, all right. So there's 2 important ones. I'll start because you've already mentioned the Agricola one. So like that one to me.
No, that was the awful one.
I mean the Agricola drafting cards. That's an original variant. Like you got to think, Andy. You're calling it awful, but yet even what you like about Agricola is still a variant. No,
I'm talking about the no cards one.
Yeah, no. Like they call it the family game. They don't call that a variant. They call it the family game. The thing, and there's now a new family edition, which is a totally separate game, and I haven't played it. But anyway, the game that I'm thinking of is Kingdom Builder, and there is one variant I play with. Now, the reason most people balk or at the idea of Kingdom Builder is that you get to draw 1 card every turn, and that's where you have to place your settlements, and it can be very frustrating to draw the same terrain twice in a row. It can actually be completely ruinous on the first turn, and so the variant that I play that tries to reduce that the impact of an initial double terrain, a repeated terrain card on the first turn is that you draw 2 cards to start the game. Ensure that they are 2 different terrains, and then you do not draw on your first turn. You only draw from your second turn on. So that way, from that point forward, it's the single card but if you've ever had to deal with that, everybody's playing where you draw one card to start the game and then you draw a second card and it's the same terrain, because you end up being forced to make a lot of poor moves that then can set up your next card being really bad too, because you're forced to get into more adjacencies that your initial placement you were trying to avoid. Had you known that you were going to have to play, you probably would have placed it in a different spot. It just can be really frustrating. So Kingdom Builder, deal 2 cards, don't draw on the first turn, make sure that they're different.
I have 2 as well. I think I've already mentioned one of them. I never play Rex without the Trader variant, where you can the Betrayal variant, where everyone's handed a card, and it has a condition you meet in order to break the shared victory condition, and there's a number on it. So if everyone meets their condition on the card, when the game ends, if you win in a joint victory, an alliance victory, you can either shake hands or flip your card over and say, "Hey, guess what? I have betrayed you. I've met my victory condition. I have a 3." And then someone goes, "Oh, you did that. Well, I met mine. And oh, by the way, mine's a 2. I win." And the third guy goes, No, guys. I actually made mine and I'm at 1. So I beat both of you. Screw you guys. I'm going home. I win. I never play Rex without that, because it just adds that much more tension when you make alliances with someone. The second variant, believe it or not, I believe to play with flare cards and Cosmic Encounter is officially considered a variant.
Oh God, I would never play without those.
So I mean, that's why I was like, no, there's no way I'm playing Cosmic. I will never play Cosmic Encounter without that flare variant. Where
that's not even present until an expansion, right?
No, it's in the base game, because you deal the flare cards out, and then you deal 2 out, and you choose your race based on those 2, and you're supposed to put those cards away. But in the variant, you shuffle those cards back into the deck, and if you draw them, you go, "Hey, I got this superpower," and if it matches your race, it's like a superpower. And when you play them, they shoot back into your hand. There's no reason not to play with flare cards from Cosmic Encounter, and the fact that that's actually a variant's a little surprising. But maybe it's to make people. I mean, the game is kind of treacherous as it is. Maybe you don't want to like.
Does the base game of Cosmic Encounter tell you to deal 2 alien powers, or I thought that the base.
Yeah, you deal 2 flare cards, and that chooses the races.
Okay.
Yeah, but you choose one. But I thought to look at the rulebook, but I actually think the variant is shuffle those cards back into the deck, and you draw them, and then it tells you how to use the flares.
Yeah.
So I was like, there's no reason not to play Cosmic without flare cards. The game's crazy enough and broken enough that, like they say, if it's not broken, it's not fun for Cosmics. You might as well break the thing as hard as you can.
Nice. I like it.
What you got, Trent?
My favorite variant is Magic's Commander variant. It's not by default how you play Magic, but it's far and away the most enjoyable version of it for me. It warps a number of the rules of the game. It's very clearly falls under variant, and it's the best version of Magic. So there you go.
Yep. I got 2, and they'll be quick. So first one I already mentioned is when playing Three Kingdoms Redux, always draw 1 more card that it says, choose and discard. I never play that game except doing that. The one that amuses me the most, even though it's in a game I'm kind of on, is in Scythe. If you look near the end of the rule book, there's the variant that says Scythe is supposed to be played quickly. You can theoretically calculate victory points every turn that it comes around to you, but this makes people upset. So the variant is if you spend more than 10 seconds calculating points, you lose 2 popularity because people don't like AP.
Oh yeah, that's in there. That's like the Mark Herman Churchill world, where if someone takes too long, or you could like say, "Nope, we're moving on." Guess what?
Pro tip to you gamers out there as well: don't laugh hysterically at the Scythe rulebook, and when your wife says, "What are you laughing at?" you explain it and forget that she's a chess player.
Bless you, Trent.
I got some evil dagger eyes out of that one.
Cool. All right, hype time. Let's hear first for an 18xx game, which unfortunately is not enough for Trent and Andy to know who's going. So let's start with the apparently this sounds to me like a mishmash of two pre-existing 18xx games. I'm going to guess it's an expansion from you, Trent.
No, it's not. It's a new. Okay, so 1822 is kind of becoming its own subset of 18xx.
Yeah.
1822 has 1822 base game, and then it has a completely separate game called 1822 CA, and now they're coming up with 1822 MX. They all basically use the same rules as 1822, but they each have a different map. The big feature of 1822 is there are tons and tons and tons of privates that all have different abilities on them, and each one of these has a completely different set of privates that come with it. Some overlap, some don't, some are new, some are different, and so on. The 1822 MX borrows from 1822 or 18 Max. It borrows the nationalization. There's a nationalization aspect of it. There's a national railroad that starts taking over other railroads. And it's also designed if the map is rather small, like the 18 Max map is. So it's probably the shortest of the lot. You can play this one in 4 or 5 hours, whereas some of the other ones are like 6, 7, 8 hours. I've actually got a prototype of this, and I'm looking forward to playing it soon.
Very cool. Well, it sounds like making that sort of what really took the world by storm in 1822 apply towards a smaller map and a shorter game certainly sounds appealing to me, because what has been mentioned as the selling points of 1822 interested me, though, like you said, the 6, 7, 8 hour playtime I think has not only led towards me being like, it's probably not for the best, but also everybody who knows me and would play 18xx with me is not going to risk one of those experiences. And they, of course, don't want to hear about it on a podcast.
Yeah, but honestly, no, there's other, like, quote-unquote maps or variants. Like, literally, 1822's becoming, like, its own system within 18xx.
And I completely forgot. There's also 1822 MRS, which is, like, variation that's just part of England.
Yeah, so you can get through it quicker.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Is it like Miss Pac-Man?
MRS is short for medium region scenario.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
I have all of these.
Yeah.
I'm not surprised.
1822 is my favorite 18xx game, and it's not even close. I absolutely love it. I would play that one every time if someone said, do you want to play one? And I know that they're actually willing to play a complicated one. That would be the first thing I name every time.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
Cool. All right. Well, in between our 18xx's, I will quickly mention something that's just silliness here. Just silliness, because there's a Kickstarter, and it might be over by now, but at least when I put this on here last week, I'm pretty sure it was still running. It's called Space Race, and it is a card-driven game with variable player powers in which you play different groups vying for being the one to win the space race in like the 1950s. And there are miniatures in the game. There's not a ton of them, but they are like historical-based rocket miniatures. And I was very intrigued by these historical rocket miniatures. It reminded me of, I don't know if anybody will remember this, but like I remember my dad collecting and via me, like vicariously through me, my dad collected the Apollo 13 pieces of the rocket that were like toys in, like, I believe Burger King kids meals. I don't remember exactly, but I remember like just like loving that experience with my dad, where like we'd buy the kids meal and then hope to get a certain piece of the rocket so he could like fit it together and make this big plastic rocket. But that's what I thought of when I saw those miniatures, and I almost stuck with it to see this project out. But I was a little bit worried because it seemed like it was a very card-driven game, and it just was. It was an interesting game. It looked to mix maybe Twilight Struggle with like Race for the Galaxy a little bit, in terms of gameplay and kind of structure. But I guess I didn't have enough faith specifically in the. In it being such a card-driven game. It looked like it was maybe too much about the cards, and I didn't have faith in that holding up. So anyway, that's my ramblings about Space Race, which is either on Kickstarter or it's done. I forget. Sorry, I've been busy.
Yeah, I actually looked at that one like probably 4 or 5 times before. I'm like, I don't need to spend more money.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I thought this looked like one that would interest you, Andy, from a theme and a production standpoint, not so much from a gameplay.
I looked at it several times, and I'm like, I could probably just teach Will High Frontier at 10. That'll be fine.
Mm-hmm. I hear you. So let's finish this episode chronologically. So we did 1822. Now we've taken this little aside for the space race of the 1950s, but our next one then chronologically would be you, Andy, with the other 18XX game on the list.
Yeah, so I'm going to quick hype 1848. The reason I am hyping this is GMT just a few days ago in their newsletter said this is their next 18XX game going on P500. So they did 46 originally, then just had 62 last year. Now they have 48. 48 is another in the 00 line. So this would be like the same designers, 54, 44, and 80. They tend to be a little more operational, a little more like a lot of funky things you can do. 1848's a little more tempered than that, although there's a lot of sort of oddities in it. It's a really good game. I've played this. I'm in my second game online of this, and I'm like just starting to figure out how to use some of the tools in it. Because the thing that makes this difference from sort of your standard 1830 clone is you've got colored regions, and when you pass those boundaries, you have to put a fake town down, and that fake stop counts as a stop unless you have a plus train, which you have to pay more for.
Oh, interesting.
And then they have what they call K towns, and there are bonuses for the more of them you can hit in a run. So like if you can manage to hit all 5, which is never gonna freaking happen unless you're playing against idiots, you can get a huge payout. But the thing is all of these cities are bunched from like one side to the south coming up east, and it's like a freaking knife fight in a phone booth with tokens to try to claim those routes as quickly as possible. It's nasty. There's a lot of potential tokening and blocking going on in this one. The thing that makes it really weird, though, is they have the Bank of England, which is like a thing you can buy shares in that has payouts, but does better each time you basically destroy a company and the bank takes it over. And I haven't figured out how to use that as a tool yet. And that's something I want to do because its payouts get stronger, I guess, like the more companies you can feed it. And so
the monster grows.
Yeah, like, so there might be like a legitimate reason to just destroy your own company to like get the bank to take it over and start a new one. And I have
something Andy will do in the game that he goes bankrupt in.
Yeah, that's probably realistically what'll happen. Well, and this is also neat because you can take out loans in this one too to like pay for stuff. And you can take out as many loans as you want, and there's no penalty at the end of the game other than every time you take a loan, your stock depreciates 2 squares. So it gets less valuable. But there's like no impetus in having to pay it back. Like, you don't have to pay that loan back ever. You just have to take your stock value to take it in the first place. So it's a weird one. But the thing is, the map overall is pretty tight. I played this asynchronously online, so it took a long time. But I think this one, you're probably talking a sub 6 hour. Like, this looks like a not long one. Actually, I had BGG open. It says average playtime 6 hours. I think if you knew what you were doing, though, this would be a 4 to 5-ish maybe. So it's not one of the monster games or anything. It is a highly regarded game that I know a lot of people have been like clamoring for and begging for a reprint of. So that's coming out from GMT, which means some really good things. 1, you're going to get really high quality components. 2, you're going to pay half the price.
Yeah.
3, you can go P500 it right now, and if you decide later on you don't want to, you're not out anything. So that's 1848 by initially 00 Games, now by GMT. If you're getting into the 18XX, can't recommend this one enough. It's a lot of fun. Actually, I think in a lot of ways it would have made a lot more sense for them to do this one before 62, because 62 is like insane in how it twists things. And this one is like, we're just going to twist a bit, just a little bit. We're going to give you a few new toys to play with, but it's not crazy. But but yeah, IP 500. In fact, the day the newsletter came out, Trent like literally messaged me like 1848 exclamation point. I'm like, just saw it 2 seconds ago. P500 now. There's a lot. There's a lot of excited people, and this one,
you.
Yep, insane people. So, if you're looking to get into some 18xx that's a little past that intro stage, past the 46, past the 30, the 89s, or the Chesapeakes, I think this is a really good next step. 18xx.
Cool.
Has 1862 released yet?
It's getting closer.
Okay.
I have like the old like Kickstarter one, so I've played it several times. But it's getting nearer.
Okay. I'm just wondering if they've announced a new one, if the previous one had made print or not. Okay.
Oh no, it's been like in the process for a while now. It's in one of those like art stages, but we don't know quite when it's gonna be delivered yet.
Oh yeah, they're saying it's at the printer. Gotcha. Okay.
Yep. No, it'll happen probably in a few months.
All right. Well, thanks, Andy. That's 1848. And now TC finishing it, like I said, chronologically with the 1861. But now it's coming to the digital age, which I'm pretty excited about. These digital games, by the way, I'm just going to get one quick aside in here. I want to see them on Switch, and I especially want to see this one, TC, because this is a game I've not yet played, and I really want to play it, and I think that the digital platform seems great for it. Take it from here.
Yeah, Mark Herman's Fort Sumter, I think, has just came out on Steam on digital. So I'm really looking
too. I've downloaded it, but I haven't played.
Yeah. So I just pushed the button. It's downloading. It should be done as soon as we finish podcasting. I'm looking forward to getting my hands on it. I really liked Fort Sumter. A lot of people didn't, but it's a great little 2-player game that it's good. I like it. I like the final crisis mechanism, and it's good stuff. And I'm really excited to get my hands on this digital version and see how it's implemented.
It's good. I don't know the digital. Fort Sumter is good though. I like it.
I can speak for the board game. I played the crap out of that thing. I'm just excited to get my hands on the digital version. And whatever sequel comes out of it, whatever next game is going to use that system.
I've heard, not that, but I've heard the next digital one is Labyrinth, but I don't know that for sure.
I've heard that too. That Labyrinth's going to be I also hear Dominant Species is given an overhaul.
Yeah,
but we'll see.
Great. I want to see it on Switch so bad because like that's where I'm doing my gaming now. I don't want it on my phone because like it feels like it clogs my phone. I don't want it I don't have an iPad that I use, and I don't ever sit in front of my computer long enough to play to play like a board game. I don't even play any video games on my computer. It's like I want this like Switch so I can play it anywhere, and that's just my arbitrary request because I want to play this game too.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for being here, fellas. It's been a fun episode. Thanks everybody for your patience in understanding that this last week we didn't have an episode. Thanks to you, TC, especially for I know how busy it's been.
I do what I can. I'll be back to normal here in a few weeks. Give me a few weeks and I'll be good.
Shouldn't be too long. Well, Trent and Andy, it's been great having you guys too. And I hope that everybody out there has a great week of gaming, and catch us next week here on The Good, The Bored, and The Ugly.
Night, everybody.
Good night. Oh, God, I am going to